Welcome to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast, where we explore the fundamental abilities and insights that make us better humans. Here's your host, Christina Eanes.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Essential Skills for Humaning. Today, we are talking to Susanne Madsen. Welcome, Susanne.
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be here today.
Well, I'm excited to talk about your book, Do the Inner Wisdom. How to do the inner work. Sorry, I was thinking of the first chapter, which I love, by the way, because it is about tapping into the inner wisdom, right?
Yes. Yeah. I had a long description or conversation with the publisher about the title, and I like the word wisdom.
I do too.
And he was like, that sounds too theoretical. Because this is a how-to book, and the book has 24 exercises, so we settled on a different title.
Do the inner work.
Yes.
Well, it comes across as wisdom, if that helps. How's that?
Yes.
But before we dive into that, can you share a little bit about your background with our listeners?
Yes. So I have a background working in corporations, in finance, running big projects, and I did that for over 15 years. And I was tired. I loved what I did, but I was exhausted. I was burning the candle in both ends.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a big aha moment because I was invited to go on a leadership program. And I was coached for the first time. I didn't even know really what coaching was.
Mm-hmm.
This was back in 2008. And I came to the coaching session saying, help, I'm exhausted. What shall I do? And within an hour, and I'm not kidding you, within an hour, I had a complete aha moment because I realized that whatever my limitations were, whatever was keeping me in the office, whatever was leading me to overworking myself, it was all it was within me to change it. So I had this wild idea. Oh my God, if I decide to leave the office at 5 p.m., I can leave the office at 5 p.m. There's actually nobody else imposing this on me other than myself. And it sounds quite simple, but that's what happens when we have limiting beliefs. It is a limiting belief, and oftentimes we're not aware of them. So I walked out of that conversation feeling incredibly empowered, as if some barrier had lifted from me, and I embarked on becoming a coach. Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah,
and the rest, as they say, is history.
Absolutely. I started coaching my colleagues. There was a transition period. My managers were very happy for me to coach overperformers, underperformers, anything. Mm-hmm. And then after, I think 4 or 5 years, I stepped out, and I've been working independently ever since.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Nice. Living the dream.
Yeah. You know what? I have not looked back, and I'm happy to say that.
Yeah, we have very similar paths. It's interesting having the realization, and I think a lot of people look externally to themselves for their happiness, rather than realizing it's all inside. Can you share a little bit more about how important it is to do that inner work and why?
Yes. You said it in a nutshell, actually. We pursue a lot of goals externally, and it's how we are mostly conditioned. And I actually think it stems from scarcity from our previous generations. You must put food on the table, you must have a good place, you must have a good education. And yes, that's true. But certainly in the Western world, most people, and I know some people are struggling, but most people, we have an abundance of material goods. So, but we still want that promotion. We still want shiny things, shiny objects. And sometimes we don't really stop and question why. But normally what happens when we get further into life, meaning, I didn't say midlife crisis, but that's the classic example, isn't it? We is this all there is to it? I've got all the shiny objects. I've got I've ticked the boxes even in my career, and yet I feel something is missing. And that's when people go into a crisis, or they feel, and many young people have this as well, they're not really sure what they want to do. They're not really sure where the purpose is coming from. And so in those situations, and I think, in fact, for most of us, it's looking inside. It's actually the Holy Grail is inside. And I'm not particularly religious, but I think the Holy Grail is inside. It's not a shiny object.
I love it. Well, and so it's funny, I did not make that connection. So maybe if we can encourage more people to do the inner work at younger ages, midlife crises will be like not a thing anymore.
Hopefully. And I know a lot of young people, they are challenging their employers because they want to know, why am I working on this? They're no longer satisfied just doing work. They want to know, how am I contributing? Because they know that if there is a purpose, they're more likely to be fulfilled. So certainly some of our happiness can be fulfilled on the outside. We will be more happy if we have a job that fulfills us. But I've come to this conclusion, perhaps, that we can only enjoy external success, meaning a great job and a great relationship, even if we are feeling fulfilled on the inside.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how about for that individual who this is a new concept for them? What would you say would be their first step in moving forward?
Oh, that's a good question, because we're all at different levels. Maybe for somebody for whom this is very new concept, I would say, are you feeling joy? On a scale from 1 to 10, where are you? And I hate to say it, but sometimes the scale goes negative. And I actually call that being below water. Sometimes we feel we're drowning and we're overwhelmed and we're unhappy. And I think mental health crisis and there's a lot of words we can associate with that. But if that's the case, we need to just actually pause and acknowledge. And I talk in the book, I talk a lot about self-compassion, because if we make it wrong and say to ourselves, oh, I shouldn't be here, I should be happier, or I can't believe I got myself into this situation, then we're just making it worse. And the Buddhists actually talk about the arrows. So the first arrow that hurts us is the event that actually is painful. Maybe I'm in a job I don't like. But the second arrow that makes it even more painful is my self-talk that makes it bad. So we need to have self-compassion and accept with some element of just grace and compassion and say, it's okay. This is where I'm at. So I think the first step is that acknowledgement that maybe there is something I would like to change. And it doesn't have to be tomorrow. If I just begin slowly to turn the ship around, it will happen.
Mm. So I'm hearing several really cool nuggets of, we'll call it wisdom, because it is wisdom in here.
Yeah.
One is, it sounds like negative emotions typically are a sign of, there's something I need to pay a little bit more attention to. And then really noticing our thoughts when it comes to that. And maybe what was that activating event that led to those thoughts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the relationship between thoughts and emotions is quite interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because let's say that it could be any event. Let's say you get negative feedback. Wow. In that moment, I have a number of emotions that kick off. I might actually feel some fear that I might lose my position or whatever. And then I have a number of, so the thought could be, oh my God, we catastrophize, so I'm going to lose my job. And then my thoughts become even worse, or I aggravate my fear. So we can go into this kind of loop. But it could also be the other way around. There's no external event. I'm fine. I'm sitting at home. I'm going for a walk. And all of a sudden I get this thought, oh my God, the 3 managers before me have been fired, which is actually the case in my previous job.
Uh-oh.
And I was worried about, if I didn't work hard, if I didn't try to cover for everybody, I would also lose my job. And so sometimes it's the thought alone that triggers a whole cascade of, we might call them negative emotions, even though we don't want to, they're all just emotions. But so we really need to be aware of what we are thinking, because our thoughts can dictate our biochemistry and our emotional state.
Absolutely. Well, and along those lines, speaking of biochemistry, your second chapter is about energy levels, restoring your energy levels. Can you say a little bit about, because emotions and all of that stuff definitely impacts our energy. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I think the book is written for people who are obviously not where they want to be. Let's say I feel overwhelmed. I'm slightly below the waterline. I feel I'm drowning a bit here. And so to begin some deep inner work is probably not the right place to start because I'm not resourced enough. I need to first put the oxygen mask on myself. And I know it's a metaphor that we often use. So that's where the energy comes in. I need to first make sure that I feel a little bit more above water. How can I begin to do that? Just by small steps. And in my coaching, I ask people, check in with yourself. What do you need? What do you need right now? What is the first step to making you feel slightly more joyful or energized? And if they're in a bad place, these are big words even, but what's just one step in the right direction for you? And for some people, it is going for a walk during lunch. For others, it's playing my instrument or actually spending time with my friends because I haven't done that for a long time. It's different for everybody. But typically, it is something that we love doing, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time. I really want to emphasize that because we all strapped for time. But doing some small activities that bring us joy really is the key to increasing our energy levels. And Rome wasn't built in a day, and we don't want to make this too ambitious. It's just one step at the time. As I said, just begin to slowly turn that ship around.
I love that. Well, I also love that that's before you do the deep work, because if we are in a negative state of mind, it's really hard to reframe, to see things differently.
Completely. And the book is actually built up like the first chapter is listening to your inner wisdom. So we begin to tune in. The second chapter, as you just mentioned there, how can I begin to increase my energy levels and really apply that oxygen mask? And then chapter 3, we begin to look at our core values, because I remember some people who reviewed my book, they said, should you not start with what your values are? And I said, well, people might not be in a place where they can begin there. We need to first just do the simple steps. Yeah, they're simple, but they may not always be easy to apply if somebody is really in an exhausted state.
Yeah. So I love that. Baby stepping people up into that. So let's say people are there. Can you talk about the importance of core values and living them?
Yeah. So you mean when people are a little bit more resourced?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm not overwhelmed anymore. I've learned to set boundaries. I've learned to delegate, and I play tennis in my spare time, whatever it is I want to do. But I don't feel fulfilled. I'm not exhausted, but there's something missing. What is it? Then we need to really look at, well, what is it that gives you meaning and value? And it's just about beginning to dream a little bit. Because when we begin to dream, it tells us something about what we are attracted to. Do you dream of becoming we're quite quick to put labels on. I was about to say yoga instructor. But more like what are the elements? Is it freedom that you are attracted to? Is it helping people? Is it something about really deeply being there for others and showing compassion for others? What's the basic nature of the values that resonate with you? And then we can begin to build up a picture. One thing I find interesting, people sometimes think they have to change their lives completely.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think that.
Yeah.
I was working
I'm smiling because I'm similar.
Yeah. And I used to think, well, maybe I should just become a farmer. I was ridiculous. I'm not into farming, but something completely different. But in actual fact, I'm still working with the same people who I worked with before. I'm still working very much sometimes within the complex projects world, but I'm doing it through coaching and leadership development. So I needed to adjust what I'm doing. Sometimes people need to adjust an element of what they're doing. Maybe they need to go and work for a different type of client, or I don't know, but we don't always have to we certainly shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Oh, absolutely. Well, oh gosh, that brings up a couple of things, right? So even sometimes just looking at things a little differently, we can be living our values. But then also on the flip side of that, like a lot of people are like, how did you go from violent crime analysis to leadership development to owning your own training business? That seems like completely different things. I'm like, but I've always been living my values, using them in just different ways. So we can stay the same, and we may seem like we're flip-flopping, but it still can be very much in alignment.
And now I'm curious, what are some of those values?
Oh my gosh, challenge, puzzles, like change, like constant change, which I love. So lots of those. Yes.
But it's a really good example because going back to my quick suggestion of should I become a yoga teacher or not, we're so quick to put up these either or scenarios. Whereas in fact, if you go, well, actually I like challenge and I like various other things, there are so many different ways in which you can get those values fulfilled.
Absolutely.
So it's almost doing this fundamental bottom-up approach and just looking at what is it I'm drawn to.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be what we do for work, right? We can fulfill it. Like we could be a yoga teacher and, I don't know, an accountant. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Some people have a job which pays the bills and it's okay, but it doesn't give them that feeling of I'm really contributing. Well, if you begin to volunteer and do something else, I think that's what you're pointing towards. That could be the perfect mix.
Mm-hmm. And actually, I see this bringing us back to at the beginning where we were talking about self-acceptance, self-compassion, all of that. Not, I like to call it not shoulding ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Should.
Yeah.
I should emphasize the shoulding ourselves.
And just to close the loop on that one, it's again becoming aware of my thoughts. What am I saying? I should be. Oh, I don't even know. I should be able to find my values easily. Well, just notice that. What are you saying to yourself? You're putting undue pressure on yourself here.
Absolutely. Yeah. What else would you like folks to know about the importance of, or the taking action on doing the inner work?
So I would probably emphasize that it is a little longer journey. We can either do it, or the book is a way for somebody to begin doing that or continuing doing that on our own. Now, if we get into some emotional turmoil, I would say it's very important that we seek help because I think the book assumes that there is no major trauma hidden. Because if we have major trauma, what some people call big T trauma, could be abuse or neglect, or then we must actually seek professional help, because otherwise we could be in a situation where we feel overwhelmed by what these exercises are bringing up.
Yeah. And I also love how you mentioned it's a journey. It's not a destination. Like I'm here, I'm all amazing now. I'm all totally self-aware and emotional intelligence. It's as we arrive at a higher, I don't want to call it level, but maybe a higher awareness, a higher level of healthiness. I don't know. There's still more to learn, still more to grow.
Yeah, and when I did my coaching certification and qualification back in 2009, beg your pardon, I thought this is me preventing the midlife crisis. Exactly what you said a moment ago. So I thought I was right on track, and et cetera, et cetera. And then because I became self-employed, I became very, very busy, and I was traveling right up until the pandemic when all the travel got cancelled, and I was burning the candle in both ends. And I realized that actually I'm still tense because I'm trying to fit all of this work in, and I'm trying to make all these trips. And yes, I did love the delivery, and I love being in demand, of course.
Mm-hmm, of course.
But I didn't have the bandwidth or the space to process my own emotions. And so when the pandemic hit, actually the lid opened up. I think actually not just for me, but for many people. And I could process a lot of stuff that I hadn't been able to process before. So I started working with a psychotherapist again, who I'd been working with 10 years prior, just to kind of process stuff that hadn't been processed. So it wasn't appropriate 10 years earlier. It was appropriate now. And so it is an ongoing process. I don't know where I will be in 10 years' time.
I know.
What will I need to process then? But it is a journey.
Yeah. I think it's exciting. Who am I going to be in 10 years and how am I going to get there?
Yeah. I also say this because I want people to know that even somebody like me who's been working with this professionally for a long time, I've done a lot of work, I've written a book on it. The more aware we become, the more we know that we can keep unpicking.
Yes.
And I also want to say that I don't think we ever get rid of our limiting beliefs, but we learn to recognize them and we learn to circumvent them and not listen to them.
I love it. Now, you mentioned coaching, and then, of course, we have the book. Can you share a little bit about your products and or services, website links, etc., that the listeners need to know more about?
Yeah. So for corporations, I run a lot of leadership programs, and then we have the coaching on top, which is, I find, really powerful when you coach and train somebody at the same time. And then I have a lot of people come to me for private coaching. And it's all on my website, SusanneMadsen.com. That's Susanne with an S, SusanneMadsen.com. And I have a ton of videos on YouTube, lots of webinars that have been uploaded. I have a number of professional books as well. I have a book about leadership, project leadership, so leadership of big complex projects. So there's quite a few things to touch into or to get familiar with. But I think the book, How to Do the Inner Work, is definitely the most relevant to what we're talking about today.
Nice.
And I recorded the audio version, I must say.
Ooh,
yes.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So we'll send people to your website in the episode description, and that links to everything else.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. What is your final piece of advice?
Oh, my final piece of advice. I would say don't delay. Do the inner work. And it doesn't have to be scary, as if you find it difficult to get into, which people may or may not, depending on who the listeners are, then work with a coach or a buddy. Work with a buddy. It's like a good friend who is also dedicated to their personal and professional development. Yeah, there are 24 exercises in this book. You don't have to do them all, so you can cherry pick. But I would say don't delay it, because you will feel more fulfilled. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think once we become aware, we cannot become unaware. So all the work you do will always serve you, many times in ways that you have no idea how it's going to serve you.
Nice. Yeah. And I love that the exercises in the book help you just start, and it doesn't need to be overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah. And you've read the book. So
yes.
Would you agree that they're very practical exercises?
Absolutely. Ones that can be done very quickly. Others, you go a lot more in depth, and I love how the baby stepping essentially through the process. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us today, Susanne.
Oh, you're welcome. It was a real honor.
Thank you for tuning in to the Essential Skills for Humaning podcast. We hope you've gained valuable insights to enhance your journey as a human being. Remember, practice makes progress. Keep honing those essential skills, and until next time, keep being the best version of yourself. For more resources, visit eanestraining.com.